This is a story about two world leaders who conspire to conquer the free world and two old fishermen who decide to expose them and hope to stop them. The dream of world conquest has fascinated men for millennia. Our story opens at Miss Universe 2013 in Moscow, Russia. Didi Baron and Aras Agralov sit at a table and watch the dress rehearsal for the awards ceremony. Lovely, aren't they? Incredible, even the black girl is gorgeous. Who is that woman? That's Maya, the choreographer came with the event as a janitor, Jewish. Aras isn't telling Didi all he knows about the old janitor. I've seen her somewhere before, but where? We meet the Pleiades, the seven sisters of the night, which enter on cue. The old janitor is Maya Pliazetskaya. Didi met her in 1965 in New York with the Bolshoi, but he still can't place her. DDJR meets Emin Agralov, where? Central Park at the Polar Bears. It's closed, someone tried to climb in and got killed. Guernica at the UN. Everything's bugged there. Which is most like you? I'm like all of them, depending. I like it better on the mountain tops. At MoMA they set up the Trump Tower meeting with the Russians. For men, a beautiful woman is unforgettable. He melts in the heat of her gaze. Political operatives exploit human weaknesses. Sex is the most effective weakness. And now they have a clear shot at their target. Vladimir Putin will make Russia great again and the prize is Ukraine. Russia will be great again with global warming creating opportunity. Putin wants it now on his watch and Russia is surrounded by enemies. Polar ice to the north. China on the east, Islam to the south. NATO to the west. Unify the white Christians, stand together against the Chinese, the Muslims, and exploit the third world together. Why be enemies when we could be comrades? Get in the Republican primary, attack everyone and leave the rest to me. Russians infiltrate the Republican Party. The political pendulum is due to swing Republican in 2016. The Democratic Party and their candidates are tired, shop-worn and predictable. All the action is with the Republicans. The new Peter the Great, Putin wants to bring Russia into 21st century Europe. Putin has been president of Russia 15 years and inherited a collapsed USSR. He's watched Russian-born and talent lost to the West, like Makarova, Mikhail Baryshnikov and thousands of others, dancers, artists. Nureyev, stolen from the Bolshoi. Gymnasts like Olga Korbut and Nadia Comaneci left their mother Russia to join the decadent West. Mark Zuckerberg sells Cambridge Analytica profile data to millions of Americans to the Russia-financed Cambridge Analytica, and then claims it was stolen. Revenge is fair play. Americans are naive and vulnerable to sophisticated propaganda. America stood by while Russians were slaughtered at Stalingrad by Hitler's Nazis. And now Russia had a presidential candidate with obligations to Putin and no place else to turn. Putin knew the power of religion and how to use it. Russian-funded bot farms used AI-powered Facebook friend bots to target millions of Americans online with divisive propaganda. They dug deep into the American psyche to affect the vote. Southern evangelicals idolized Trump as a new messiah. And Russian memes cast Hillary Clinton as the devil with their online outreach. They also targeted blacks with memories of mass incarceration and FBI attacks on their leadership. Putin's passport application shows his Jewish lineage, something he needs to keep hidden with public displays of devotion to the Russian Orthodox Church. Putin gives religious leaders Rolex watches. And they give him their blessings for the war in Ukraine. Trump is into beefcake, too. Never mind, it's all fake. FBI Director Comey delivers October surprise leak of Russian hack of the DNC, Trump wins the 2016 election. The payoff begins as Trump attacks the US government and its bureaucracies with his appointments. Trump obstructs the Mueller investigation into the Russian interference in 2016 election, pardons Flynn, Manafort, and Storn in return for their silence. Act 2 The 2020 election. Trump was certain to win the 2020 election. until the US fell ill with the COVID-19 pandemic. It first showed up in the Wuhan wet market. It might have been a bat sold for food in the market. It could have come from a pangolin. It might have escaped from the virology lab in Wuhan. It might even have been from a raccoon dog. Its true origins will probably never be known, but it swept the world in a storm. Bodies stacked up in the morgues, then were moved into refrigerated semi-trailers in Trump's hometown of Queens, New York. The politicians started double masking to conceal that they were using high-quality masks which were forbidden to the public. Meanwhile, Chinese were triple masking in their hospitals. But Americans were told not to wear masks, rather to hand wash. Chinese students stayed in school, wore warm clothing because all the windows were open. Schools closed in America as teachers threatened to strike. VP Mike Pence was put in charge of the COVID response, and he recommended prayer. The CDC and the NIH went along and 1 million Americans died. Robert Redfield, head of the CDC, tried to warn America. But he was forced to retract his warning. People kept dying and the government kept lying. The New York Times had to sue the CDC for data, and they dragged their feet. They had to decontaminate N95 masks for hospital workers, and the unions didn't like reusing them. Core constituencies of both parties deny science, and politicians are afraid to speak out against religion. The imperial presidency is thinking only of re-election. Fear that polls will become super-spreader events causes states to authorize mail-in ballots for the 2020 election. The USPS removes mailboxes and warns of disruption of service. At his Tulsa Juneteenth rally, the election tide turns when Trump's token Herman Cain dies 2 weeks later of COVID. Act 3, Ukraine. Trump loses the election and Putin invades Ukraine, anyway. The slaughter begins at Bucha. Without an ally in the White House, things are a lot more difficult now. Putin thought he could take Ukraine intact and without a fight, now he has to face an empowered NATO. Ukraine sinks Putin's Black Sea flagship Moskva. It's too soon to tell how it will end in Ukraine. It could become a much wider war. As more people die in Ukraine and Russia, Putin's regime could come to an end. At the same time, Trump is the leading candidate for the Republican nomination in 2024. Act 4, Election 2024. At the same time Putin struggles to hang on to power, stuck in a bloody stalemate in Ukraine, Trump is trying to regain the U.S. presidency while facing multiple felony prosecutions in multiple jurisdictions. The love of his life, mother of his 3 favorite children, dies of a fall the night before she's planned to leave the U.S. for the first time in 3 years or COVID isolation, and is hastily buried.